Hi there, and welcome to Side Quest, the every other week podcast we do when we're not having wacky adventures, when we tend to talk about pop culture or have fascinating discussions with interesting guests. Well, we'll get to the interesting guests in a minute. Let's get to the uninteresting guest, the usual schlubs. Who do we have with us today? We've got myself, Steve Weverill. We have Robert Bevan, Drew Hayes, and Joseph Brassey. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello, friends. I'm interesting.
Well, yeah, you're interesting. I find you interesting.
Thanks, Steve.
But enough about you. Stop hogging the limelight, because we got guests today. We've got somebody joining us who have produced a documentary that is absolutely pertinent to the interests of most of the people listening to this podcast. Charles Mers and Wally Schrass. Hi, guys.
Hello.
And before we get into this documentary and what it's about, some of you may find Wally Schrass's voices familiar if you're a longtime fan of A&D, and in particular a Brandon Thighmaster fan, and you've downloaded the Brandon Thighmaster audiobooks, which you definitely should have done. Wally Schrass is the producer and narrator of those books.
Yes, indeed.
So we've got two Brandon Thighmaster voices on the podcast at the same time. Science says it wasn't possible, but here we are.
What does the other Brandon Thighmaster voice sound like?
I am the other Brandon Thighmaster voice.
Oh, do you go with your own voice, or do you do any sort of?
I can't do any other voice, man. This is all I've got. I make do.
There you go.
You're the professional Brandon Thighmaster voice. I'm the raw, uncut Brandon Thighmaster voice.
It's so funny to hop on with you. You know, obviously, I had no idea what you would sound like or anything. Obviously, I just have your picture in the book jacket.
That's absolutely what I look like as well. The John Luther Davis drawing of Brandon Thighmaster is as close to my real life countenance as anything gets. So
there you go.
You could just go with that.
That's exactly how I imagine you. So we'll keep that forever. If we're ever to get together and grab a drink, I'll know to look for you in the pub that way. So
I am absolutely prepared to disappoint you massively. So it's good to have you on, particularly as if I'm gonna throw a cheap and tacky plug out there, that Brandon Thighmaster and some other guys, the latest installment in the Brandon Thighmaster Adventures, is coming out an audiobook. If not by the time this podcast goes live, then very soon to it going live. So everyone listening, keep an eye out for that. Did you have fun recording it, or was it weird? Was it a weird experience?
So I was thrilled to hear from you again. I was really, this was one of my favorite books that I ever narrated, just because it is just so fun, and it has the ability to just dive into characters and character voices and the comedy and stuff. And this, I'm not trying to blow smoke up you here, but more of the books that I do are of a different genre. I don't know if you want to edit that in or not, but I voice a lot of romance novels. And so
What's more romantic than Brandon Thighmaster?
Yeah. The ultimate romance novel.
He's got his vow of celibacy, and he doesn't want to give it up. So the romance novels really drive home some pretty intense scenes that are not exactly something Brandon would want to be partaking in, to say the least. I think he'd be a bit uncomfortable.
You are driving home some pretty intensive imagery right there. That's true.
Only an island knows.
Yeah, I only have like one or two other authors that I've done more than one sort of book with. Usually it's just sort of a one-off or whatever. But those books are, they are romance novels, and they do get quite intense. And I do know both of those authors outside of the writing. One is in Iowa, and the other one is in Arizona.
That amuses me.
So-
I like to think there's a lot of romance fans out there who maybe follow your narrator leads through the books and go, oh, what's this Brandon Thighmaster thing? Oh, this is going to be hot. It's a mostly nude monk. He doesn't have sex with anything.
They'll be sorely disappointed until, of course, they get to. Well, obviously, I don't want to spoil the book, but obviously, there's a scene in this latest novel where you do get a bit of an intense bite of apple. We'll sort of leave it at that.
There's a close cut thing.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it to the viewer's imagination. Buy the book. I'm not saying you have to jerk off, but if you want to, it's fine. Don't worry.
Encouraged, but not mandatory.
One step ahead of you, buddy. So, how did you two connect?
I think I auditioned the first Brandon Thighmaster book on ACX, and what I did was I put it up to the vote with about maybe 4 that I liked.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just left up to the readers. And Wally was the clear winner, which I was hoping for because I was like, well, that's the best one. But I want to appear like this is a democracy. But
Thank you so much.
Fan approved.
Yeah, it's such a fun book, fun material, and just a fun voice. It's not a voice that really hurts my own voice to do. So that's always a good one, It's easy to slip out of. That's the only issue with it. So if I'm jumping around between different characters in the book, there's a lot of times where I'll have to like re-record the same line, even though it's maybe just a one-off or something like that. Just so I can, sort of maintain that thought of what I have, of what I'm sounding like in the voice and everything. So, it's a fun process. It really is. Putting together, audiobooks is a different producing muscle for sure, especially because I'm narrating them. But I don't know if we necessarily want to segue into it, but obviously producing documentaries and movies is totally different. And certainly what I came up doing, the audiobooks were always something that I found a little bit later on, and that was just a wonderful thing that I've been able to sort of extend that passion for performance and everything, and that I have a lot more control over because I do have a family and everything. I can't be going out and auditioning like I once did. So it does make it much nicer to be able to do that. So.
Well, that is a useful segue, actually, because normally we've had a couple of voice actors on before because we're all authors on this podcast and we've all got kind of our own connections. And we normally like to talk about how they kind of get into that work. But like you say, you're more familiar with other work, producing and directing other things. And that's what we're going to talk about. And I think the audience will be very interested in hearing. You're here with Charles Mers, director of the documentary that you have produced, Games Master. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, do you want me to start, or you want Charles to jump in here first? What would you prefer, guys?
Oops, I think we just lost Charles there to some brief technical difficulties. And there he is.
I think I jumped networks. I think that was the issue.
Beautiful. Charles, it was an amazing transition of going, I produce audiobooks, but I also produce documentaries. Charles, tell me about it.
Yeah, I heard that part. It wasn't great.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, until we can think of a better segue, this will have to be.
All right.
Tell us about the documentary we've just effortlessly segued into. Charles Mers.
All right. So, well, the documentary is about board game designers and the board game industry as a whole. Kind of, a lot of people, when I've told them, hey, I'm making a documentary about board game designers specifically, people think, I never thought that was a job, but of course it is. People have no idea where they come from. They magically appear from the dungeon of Parker Brothers or something. I don't know. But this kind of shines a light on the process, what it takes, where they come from, and kind of the steps a person would have to go through if they had an idea for a game.
Yeah, I think we're in a renaissance right now.
We were in a renaissance before, but since everybody's stuck at home, that has kind of skyrocketed this renaissance into, you've talked to any game store owner or even Amazon, like game sales have tripled since the pandemic started.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I contributed.
I busted out the old Hero Quest set. That's not very innovative, but actually, saying that, I busted out my old set, but I did notice during the pandemic that Hero Quest re-released a new Hero Quest set, so everyone's getting in.
Talking to a lot of the designers, Hero Quest was a game that a lot of designers had fond memories of. So they were doing something right, and it's a strong brand. So it's amazing that they hadn't done it before, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I think it was just kept alive by people like me who just forced their children to play it.
I finally got on the Catan and what's the other one? Dominion train. I was happy to see the creators of both of those on there.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Dominion and Catan, actually. I whenever I get asked, hey, what's your favorite game? I usually say Dominion, and just because of how many variances there are, in the game, how many times you can change it up, even if you don't have expansions.
My son is almost 8, and we play a lot of Dragonwood, 5-minute dungeon, and Carcassonne, and the kids just love it. So
yeah, Carcassonne just got the re-release.
There you go, taking advantage of that pandemic dollar, I guess. Sarcasm aside, I see the attraction, because when you don't have the usual options on the table, I guess you can either just watch your kids play Minecraft endlessly, or say, let's do something we can all do. It doesn't involve being in front of a screen endlessly. Speaking as somebody who has to work from home, I can absolutely see why, particularly in the pandemic, there'd be a rise in people just wanting to connect over something physical rather than digital.
Oh, absolutely. Some of that was even present prior to the pandemic. It's just we've gotten to a point where you don't really have to leave the house for anything if you don't want to, and that was certainly put to the tests with the pandemic. But we were already there, so people were clamoring for something you had to be face to face for, an experience that was tangible and in person.
One of the things that I think we noticed more so was in our trip to Germany, and certainly at Essen Spiel, it's families that are at that convention. It's not prevalent here in the States yet. It's getting there. Obviously, this pandemic will have a lot to do with that. I think it would be really interesting to see in 5 years who the individuals are that are at all of these conventions. I think you're going to see more families. We certainly saw some, but I think that, the attitude around board games and gaming, it really is a family affair beyond just, hey, get the Monopoly board out of grandma's closet. It's, hey, let's try this new game. Let's sit down. Let's have a game night. I remember hearing stories from people saying that, Saturdays in this town in Germany, they all got together and they would play games for, 2 days straight. And they'd just be, drinking and eating and just making, food for everybody at the house, and people just sort of come in and go. And, you got a couple different games going on in a couple different rooms, which is everybody just got together and they brought their kids, everything. And, they didn't do this every weekend, but it was, something they tried for at least a month or whatever. And I was like, man, that sounds amazing. I was like, how is nobody doing that here in the States? Or at least, I know we get, small game nights going during the week or during the month or something like that. I know Charles has a pretty consistent group that gets together. And those were also, one of the producers on the film, and other individuals that had worked on the film as well. So it was the sort of thought process around game nights and getting together to play games definitely is changing. But we're not quite there yet. I think you're probably seeing more in Europe though.
That makes sense.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like, I mean, I remember being a kid and people kind of getting excited about board game nights, but back then board games sucked. If it wasn't Hero Quest, it was shit. It was either, I mean, Monopoly was the most interesting game, but that was, somebody would get stabbed with a fork at some point. So nobody wanted to play Monopoly. Board games are just so interesting now compared to what they used to be. It's, I think, just the sheer, like you say, the renaissance of what is available for board games in the mainstream now. Because I understand there were always nerdy, overcomplicated board games, but they used to, they were kept in the basement where they belonged, away from the light of the sun and the shame of their ancestors. But now they've come out of the basement and people are playing these wonderfully complex, involved board games. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what triggered you to make the documentary? Was it noticing the resurgence, or I guess the kind of acceptance of the mainstream of these board games, or did you just follow it up from the ground level as passionate gamers yourself?
Well, one of the producers and myself, we had started playing a lot of board games, and it was one of those things where it's just like, we just kept, getting more and more into the hobby, and we started going to, some local conventions, and we just got more and more excited about things, and eventually there was nothing left to do with the hobby except make a movie about it. And, that's kind of how it came to be, as silly as that might sound. He had produced one or two other documentaries prior to this, and he kind of came to me with the idea, and I was like, "This is great. Let's go. Let's do it." And from that point on, it was all systems go.
I would love to say to you that we got so good at D&D that we made a podcast out of it, but our listeners know that's not true. That quite the opposite is true.
Arguably very much the opposite.
But I do appreciate your journey. It's like, oh man, we are so good at board games and being board game fans right now.
No, I didn't say that we were so good at them. I didn't say we were so good at them. We were so interested in them, Just because you're interested in skiing doesn't mean you're ready for the Olympics.
I get the impression that you put out there because you know that there's some board gaming gunslinger out there that would have hunted you down.
Oh, I've already been hunted down. I'll tell you, as soon as people hear that I've directed, or I was directing a documentary on board games, people immediately want to play me in board games, as if like that magically makes me good at board games. I was at a bar, and obviously this was another lifetime, but I was at a bar, and some guy heard about it, and the movie wasn't even out, and they had Connect 4 there, and he demanded that I play him in Connect 4 because he thought he was so good. And I was like, I don't want to play Connect 4 with you, but I did it because I was nice that day. I don't know, but no.
Did you win?
I almost won. It was later in the evening, and it was a bar, so you can imagine why I may not have been on my game. So, but people are really excited to play me for some reason, which I'm not even excited to play me, so I don't know.
To be fair, though, Charles is a wonderful person to play games with, and that sort of word of wonderful is for a number of reasons, right? He is very, very good at a number of games, but he is also game to play just about any game. And he'll give you all of himself when he's playing that game.
Well, you've just put that out on the internet.
Wally's ruining my strategy. My strategy is to set expectations low and come in just sneaky.
I knew it.
No, it's I will say this, that and Wally's forgetting a lot of the times that I if for some reason somebody decides to, some games have a mechanic where you can screw over another player, or you can take something away from them, and I will threaten people, hey, don't do that, or I will devote the rest of my game to tanking you. And one day, Wally decided to test that, and I was like, I gotta hold up to my threat. I gotta keep my street cred. So I was like, and it was early in the game. I was like, don't do it, Wally. You don't want to test this. And he did it. And Wally came in last, and I came in second to last. But Wally was way last. So but that
Was that in Lords of Waterdeep?
that was in Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
And that was a win for
Worth
me.
it.
You're the only one that lost that day. It was
Totally
definitely
worth it. Totally worth it, right? If it had worked, it would have been glorious.
Well, no, it did work. You lost. I mean,
Yeah.
you had a horrible time.
If it had worked for me, to go
no.
on you like that, then that would have been even.
No, I had to make sure. I had to make sure.
This is what we have now instead of samurai warriors.
Yeah,
That's right.
The new Wild West.
Speaking of Wild West, have you guys ever played a game called Wacky Wacky West?
No.
No, but it sounds interesting.
No, I saw it listed in the documentary by some guy that designed a bunch of games.
yeah. They might know it as Drunzer and Druber or something close to that. If they know it at all, it probably has a different name. Not in America, I guess. But it was designed by Klaus Teuber, the creator of Catan. It was one of the games he created before Catan. One game of the year. The non-American version has a completely not Western theme, because that wouldn't make any sense, of course, in Europe. But obviously in America, they were doing some historical thing. They were doing like some historical references, and that's why I don't know what the names are. Because being an American, I have no idea what they're talking about.
I was just going to say, one of the most wonderful things about going and, sitting down with these designers is, so many of these games are unfortunately out of print, right? That they created because there's only so much room on shelves. There are only so many buyers for games after a certain point. When you go to, Klaus's house, you go down to his basement and it is like stepping into a board game emporium. I mean, there is, all of his games that he's created and now games that he has co-created with his son, Benjamin, and so many artifacts from all of, the years of, Catan being placed in these different, parts of the world and getting this iteration and that and everything. And it's quite spectacular. And they are just as proud of that game as they are, the game that, only sold X amount of copies and want to share it with you. And, so many of those games became some of our all-time favorites. I mean, Hoity Toity, which again is also called something different, easily became one of our go-tos when we were on the road. We played that an incredible amount of times.
Oh, nice. I mean, I wonder, you saying only so much room on the shelves, and I did talk earlier about Hero Quest and how it seemed ludicrous to me that was, you had to buy a set off eBay for so long before they decided to reprint it. I wonder how much of the board game renaissance has got to do with, I guess, crowdfunding, Kickstarts, home 3D printing, all the kind of technological advances we've seen in the last 10 years or so.
Also Amazon, because you don't even have to worry about shelves.
I'll say that, Amazon definitely sped up the process, because going into a game store and, talking to if you're a regular person who's got kids, going into a game store might be a little bit intimidating. You got a bunch of people at tables playing Magic the Gathering, and it's just a foreign environment to you, and you don't even know where to start. Being able to browse and all of these titles and read what people have to say about them without, fear of looking dumb or just being even having to leave your house has definitely sped up the awareness of certain titles of games and, all of that stuff. It's definitely helped things along quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that, because, as someone who would feel dumb going in, people ask, I go into a game shop, I'm looking for a game. Well, what kind of games do you like? My limited experience with modern board games would make me feel insecure.
I definitely get that. I mean, I was definitely in that camp as well. I would feel like, growing up, I definitely loved board games. Like I would occasionally get board games. Yeah, I would occasionally get board games for, a holiday or something and love them and wonder, hey, where can I get more of these? Well, I would go to Toys R Us and it would just be the same sort of things, but I was getting like these cool different games that weren't at Toys R Us and I didn't know where to get those. But I had family members that were into board games and they would, pass these kind of games along and stuff. But even into high school and stuff like that, I mean, I just wasn't going into a game store. It wasn't until, much after college where I felt like, oh, okay, like I know I've seen some of these games here at like Barnes and Noble, and I bought, I've purchased them, and now I feel like, okay, I have a general sense of like, if I go into a board game store now, I know enough of those titles that I can be like, hey, I loved this. What's a game that's like that? And then, you have that sort of shorthand. What's wonderful about this renaissance is now I think more and more of those individuals. Anyway, I think just more of those individuals that otherwise weren't accessing the hobby before. I think there's a little less stigma around it, certainly now, and that's only a great thing. That's going to lead to more games, more gamers, and lots more creativity, which I definitely think we're seeing here, especially the last 10 years. We're seeing so much more creativity with just sort of what's possible with a board game.
Yeah, I think also internet as a research tool that allows you to test the water before you jump into the store environment. I remember growing up and we have Games Workshop in the UK, and that's all Warhammer. And you walk in and there's just a huge table in the middle with this entire diorama of Space Marines, and you think, that looks great. And then you talk to the inevitably ponytailed middle-aged man and like, what's going on here? And he just blares static out of his mouth, and you just you're turned off the entire experience. Like, just give me my miniatures, I'm going home. But now I suppose there's so much more scope to look at the wiki for these things and inoculate yourself a little bit before you go into that environment,
or just see how to play. Like the ability to watch a YouTube of a game being played is just world changing for some of us like me who are really bad at reading directions and understanding shit.
Well, there's a handful of rule books that are great games and are among some of the worst rule books ever written. So it's not always the fault of you or someone else at home. I've had to watch 2 or 3 like walkthroughs of a game to try to learn how to play. Done it at least 2 or 3 times. Otherwise, I would never have learned how to play the game.
Yeah,
that is another thing that makes Charles wonderful to play games with, because he will bring new games to your home and not be like, hey, let's check this out tonight. Oh, we've got to read the rule book before we play. No, he's coming prepared. He's read everything. He's watched the videos. Like, he knows how to play and is a great teacher of that game, which is amazing. It's such an amazing quality. I obviously, as you all know from playing lots of different games, like you cannot underestimate how helpful that is to have someone that has played it before or understands how it is played.
I still can't make heads or tails out of Munchkin.
I
had friends come over, and they came over for a game night, and both of them had played Munchkin, and they understood it, or so they said. And so I said, all right, well, you guys can teach me. And almost immediately, they were arguing about the rules. It's like, you don't fucking know.
It's funny that Steve mentions the Games Workshop employee guy, because I was actually we have them at least in my area of the US. We have them too, and I've recently started painting minis as my quarantine hobby. and I went into a Games Workshop store looking for like a mini holding handle a week ago, and I met literally exactly that guy.
Probably the same guy. They're just like a species of people. They've got their own unique language and look, and they're very happy with this. But I did not understand a word they're saying.
It is interesting. The miniatures culture is very interesting because there is an entire group that is attached to those old military war games, right? And don't really jump outside of those. And then you have some of these, newer games that have miniatures and are all encompassing and trying to bring in lots of new people and players and give them access to, this world of board games where you have these individual characters that have a little bit more features as opposed to like a meeple. I know in our film, Jason Serrato speaks to that. And it's very interesting because those military style, huge campaign board books and stuff, those are generally older gamers, and they are dying out. There's not a lot of hope to keep those really going after they sort of pass with this generation. And I wonder if there's a way to preserve those beyond just the the books and stuff like that. I have no idea if those are available online, or if that sort of defeats the whole purpose. Charles maybe knows a little bit more on this.
Well, I'll say that the barrier of entry with miniatures is so high.
It is. It really is.
Like it's astronomically high, because even after you get the miniatures, forget the mental gymnastics you have to do to try to figure out how to play the game once you get all of the stuff. You have to buy the paint, you got to buy the paintbrush, you got to buy the primer and the sealer, and then you have to buy the miniatures. So like already
it's really expensive.
If you want it to look good, even painting one, you're already at least I want to say about $40 to $50 in for one. Obviously the cost goes down the more you paint, the more miniatures you paint. But
barrier of entry is high.
I did it a little bit, not like in an intense way, and not with like Warhammer or anything. I actually the game Ray Guns and Rocket Ships that's in the documentary? I was like, well, let's see what it means to paint a miniature. Let's see, and I did a few of them, and I was like, wow, this is time intensive, and this is cost intensive, and like people who are really into this hobby really commit, and so I understand why it's so hard to get into it to begin with.
Yeah, but mind you, with again, I like to go on HeroForge.com and just make my own custom minis for no other reason than I find it enormously sad.
Yeah, I love doing that.
You can print those out in color. So I guess 3D printing technology, home 3D printers, is maybe going to change the face of that and make it a little bit more accessible as well down the line.
There you go.
Yeah.
But then again, there are people who are, I guess, just painting those miniatures, just find that enormously satisfying.
Yeah.
If I had the patience for it, I might, but I definitely don't.
So when I did painting, I just had one on my desk, and just sometimes as a break, I would paint for 10 minutes and I would put it down. It wasn't like a long sessions or anything like that.
You could give it up anytime you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting. You say that kind of campaign is dying out, that way of life. I guess we'll have to resurrect them into some kind of futuristic theme park down the line. As we're talking about this documentary, what would you say are your favorite gaming experiences? Like, what are the games that you most enjoy playing with other people?
So are you talking about specific experiences, or are you talking about just in general, like what game? Because could be taken
specific experiences. That's probably more interesting or more incriminating. I don't know.
We talked about one where I completely devoted a game to making sure Wally came in last place. That was a great game.
It really was. It's totally memorable. I still remember that night.
He's never going to forget that night. as long as he lives. So your favorite memory is destroying Wally. Okay.
No, well, it's one of them. I mean, I will say that I enjoy social deception games because it takes qualities that are completely intangible. You play chess a number of times. You're going to get really good at chess and you're going to know how to win. Whereas when you're playing social deception games, depending on who's playing, there's no the strategy changes with every person, and you take one person out, you put another person in, the strategy completely changes. And so there's something fun about that. And when you can play it enough times with certain people where you can communicate without speaking, when you get to that level, that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can see that.
I will say one of my favorite memories does not include myself, but includes Charles and my wife playing an unbelievably epic game of Wacky Wacky West when we were in Copenhagen while filming. And it was just one of those games that just like you could feel the excitement as it built toward the end. It's one of those where it comes down to the last turn and everything. Obviously Charles can speak to it a little bit better than I can, but obviously that was like one of those games that just you remember because it was such an awesome. I mean, the trip to Europe to film Game Master, I think we all agree was amazing. I mean, we were so fortunate to be able to get together the funding to be able to put that piece into the documentary. I think it really, really helps give that full perspective, that truly global perspective on, how impactful board gaming is, to, that culture, right? It's a much bigger deal over there than it is here. And so I think that, anytime we played games, it was at the end of the day, we had, been running around and finding, one individual or another individual, in this remote part of, a country we had never been to, or a town where we didn't speak the language or something. And it always made for just magical nights. I think we would all agree there was a night when we took a trip across, is it the Baltic Sea?
I don't know anything about geography, man. Come on.
But anyway, we crossed the bridge from Denmark into Sweden, and then took it from Malmo into this northern tip of Germany to get back, instead of driving from Copenhagen back into Germany. By the way, we drove this whole distance all through the west coast of Germany into Denmark, going to get these interviews and everything. And we did an overnight on this boat, and we played board games, for hours, and it was just lovely. And there's really something to be said for just being with a wonderful group of people and playing a board game, right? There's obviously the world is finding that out through this pandemic, as awful as that is, of how they're being placed into this situation. But there is something to just sitting down and slowing down and enjoying the company of others, and just sort of having the board game there is a little bit of a thing for everyone,
Oh, it makes total sense.
Yeah, that's quite inspiring, actually. And off the back of that inspiration, if you were going to say to people listening, as we hopefully and soon emerge blinking from our lockdown, desperate to have human contact again, for those looking to get into playing board games with friends, what would you recommend is the ideal kind of starter game?
I would always say Ticket to Ride. I think
Yeah.
you can do that with old and young, and there's physical pieces which is helpful. And there's cards, that are basic. There's the point of entry on Ticket to Ride is pretty easy. There's only 3 things really you have to know. It's like you can either put down trains, pick cards, or gosh, what's the other thing you can do? Put down trains, pick cards, and do one other thing. I don't know. I'm fine to sound like
You can get new routes.
yeah. You can pick out. You can pick new routes, whatever. So that's really it. And you can just sit down and go after it. Obviously, if you have somebody that has played it many times, they will annihilate you. That is undeniable. That is undeniable. I know one of the conventions was at Strategicon, where the guy would just sit there.
Was that Strategicon?
Yeah. And he's got each version, and he just has a checklist of how many games in a row he's played, and you can bet him $1 or something like that to play him or something like that. I forget what it is. Yeah, Ticket to Ride or Dominion. If you have someone that's more
Dominion, really.
Yeah, if they're wanting to come into, if they're wanting to kick it into the next level, if they're like, I've played Ticket to Ride or whatever, and you're like, well, have you played Dominion? It's like that's a great game to then scratch that itch of the other games that still have wide availability and wide appeal. There's a couple more that are like a little bit more inside baseball or something like that you would maybe recommend, but just 2 off of the shelf. Those are 2 home runs. I've rarely run into someone that has not enjoyed either one of those 2 games. Of course, someone on this podcast will speak up and be like, I hate both of those. What are you saying?
No, I've played both of those. I played Ticket to Ride once, and I won. Woohoo!
I think we did that on a Rodeo episode for the digital version.
And play it again. Quit while you're ahead.
Yeah, I will, because I not a huge fan of it, but Dominion, I played that quite a bit with my family. I played it with a friend. That's the thing. That's I get introduced to these games by friends, and that's how I get into them. I can't even imagine going into a game store and just picking something random off the shelf. Dominion. That's I'm just surprised you mentioned it as an entry level game, because it's I don't know, I find it a little bit involved.
Because it is all in the box, right? And,
yeah.
Here's the cards you're going to get. I'm going to get the same cards. I'm going to be able to explain what those cards do. There's just these 10 cards you've got to worry about, and then coins, right? But for the most part, here's 10 cards. This is all you got to focus on. You don't have to worry about, some crazy other thing that I'm going to throw down in the middle because I know this so well or whatever. I might know that one of the 10 cards that is present that I can pick out of, the center there, maybe I know the benefit of that based on some of the other cards that are, in those 10 that we've laid out. But I think that one of the great things about it is it's all right there in front of you, and you're sort of responsible for your own sort of thing. But, everybody knows what everybody has. You know what I mean? So if someone's got a question, you can explain it. And that's a big part of entry level games is, no one wants to play a game with someone that's played it 1,000 times before. They're going to get their ass kicked. Like, that's not any fun. So you want to be able to explain.
That was my first experience with Dominion.
Yeah.
Got my ass kicked by an 8-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to happen, but at least you can still have some hand holding in there while it's going. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
What I like about that game is that even with the basic set, even without the expansions, I mean, they've got 30 or 40 different cards, but you're picking 10 at random, so it's kind of a different game every time.
I think there was a sign at Gen Con, and they were advertising, I don't know, I forget which expansion.
Nocturnes, I believe.
Okay. And they said there's like 9 billion versions.
Not 9 billion. I
thought it was like 9 billion.
I thought it was over 1 million.
No,
but
oh no,
I-
no, 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 no. It was legitimately like a 9 billion versions of this. You can, if you really wanted to, with this next expansion, right? You could have, you know, X amount of however many versions or whatever. Maybe it was only 9 million, but it's still 9 million.
We
Well,
all agree it's a number big enough that I
Yeah.
am not going to
That's
count
right.
it.
Once you get into 5 digits, it doesn't even fucking matter.
Yeah,
no. There's also they've released another expansion since then too.
Right.
Well, there you go. It's just now. It's infinity now.
It might as
The
well.
game
be.
will never
Game will
end.
never end.
Yeah.
Charles, what would yours be there?
Entry level game.
Yeah.
Twilight Imperium. No, that's no. I would probably say something like Codenames, because I'll tell you, Codenames. If you've never played any of these games, like, I think Codenames kind of is a really easy doorway to let people know that games are more than Scrabble or Monopoly, and kind of it gives people an experience that they're not used to with a board game.
Yeah, that's super
And
important.
you can look at it, and you can, after, if you sit there and you literally nothing is said to you and you watch 2 turns being played, you can understand the rest of the game. It's not a really hard game to understand the basic rules of. And there are advanced nuances if you really get into it, and then it gets really complicated. But just the base understanding of how the game functions, I don't know if it could be more simple. And once people have an experience with a board game that they did not think existed, they are open to other experiences with other board games. And so I think that's always a really good one to open the door.
Mm.
The worst part about it is that you need 4 players.
I think you're absolutely right, because there are these little games, these little surprising games that for a lot of people entirely redefine what a board game even means.
For sure.
And I think, Codenames is definitely kind of an easy introduction into that world outside of Chutes and Ladders, I guess. But I'm still disappointed that neither of you said Hero Quest.
I mean, in my heart of hearts, I want everyone to play Twilight Struggle with me. I am that person. I do think it's the best. It's the most incredible game. And I've only known one person ever that I've been able to play the game with. I mean, I tried to get Charles to play with me at Strategicon one year.
I couldn't do it. It was really difficult. It was a lot of, as someone who knows nothing about history, I have a vague idea that we might have won whatever war that was. That's about all I got. I don't know how things work out.
I have a copy of I have a copy of Rising Sun that I got for Christmas this past year, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. The figures are gorgeous. The cards and everything are gorgeous. But I'm like, I understand this game takes basically a whole day to play.
Yeah.
It's like I have 2 very small children, and my wife works. My wife works is the office job, one of the 2 of us, and that's just kind of not happening right now.
Jason Serrato really loves that game.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I can't wait to get to try it.
Well, I'll tell you what, we should probably talk a little bit about where to find this documentary, because I think anyone listening to this, particularly from our audience, is probably going to be very excited about board games right now. So where can we find the documentary Game Master?
Well, do you know all the places and all in all the locations? I'm not even sure anymore.
Folks can watch it streaming now on Amazon Prime if they're a Prime subscriber in the US or Canada, and also available for rental or purchase on Amazon, as well as iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, YouTube, Vimeo, and Fandango now, and then available in the UK on iTunes as well. And we are set for release in Germany this June.
I thought it was July.
Nice.
Awesome.
But this summer sometime. June, July, it's going to come to Germany soon.
Keep an eye out, Germans.
Kind of sounds like a threat, Steve.
Beware, Germany.
The Russians are on your doorstep.
Yeah, I won't do any of my German on the podcast here. As Charles will tell you, what I do is I try and learn some of the language before I go to a place. I used to be much better with languages, just in general. But accents and dialects are really good, right? I've maintained that as obviously to bring it back around to the voicing and narrating audiobooks, still able to maintain dialects quite well. And so if I just know a few words, I can hop into regional dialect pretty well and get myself into a fair amount of trouble with individuals thinking that, hey, you're speaking the language to me. What are we trying to switch over to English for? And I know I've sort of buried the story there, but that is one of Charles's favorites. He's welcome to tell it if you would like.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I mean, the story is that we walked into a bar in German, and Wally tried to be a hotshot and speak to this guy in German, and very quickly Wally ran out of German, and he's like, sprechen Sie Eng, and the guy at the bar was like, what do you mean sprechen Sie Eng? Sprechen Sie Deutsch? And he pointed at Wally. He's like, I heard you. You talk German.
You did the accent. Now commit.
That's right.
Yeah, and then we had to explain, like, no, we don't really know German. We're just Americans. And so,
for a couple of guys making documentaries about board games, you guys get challenged in bars quite a lot.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how to negate that at all, but for whatever reason, I know
I've got that personality as well.
We're telling a lot of stories like that. I guess it's sort of our MO there, but no, we're pretty good. No, we found this place that was really off the beaten path. I mean, we're talking 25 miles off of the Autobahn. My wife found she's great with TripAdvisor, where she can find that needle in a haystack basically anywhere we are. Found this amazing restaurant where we walked in, and every table had a reserved sign on it, and no one was in the restaurant. And we were like, can we eat here? And they were like, well, it's gonna get busy. We're like, okay, sure. Legitimately did get insanely busy. By the time we were done with our meal, there was a wait out the door to get into this place for dinner. Unbelievable. It turned on a dime like that. You drove into this very, very quiet, sleepy town on a Friday. At that time, it was afternoon. Everybody got out of work, and then everybody went to this restaurant. It was the place. It was so funny.
Yeah, decent pick then.
Yeah, it was great. Legitimately great. Best sauerkraut on the trip there. Better schnitzel at the place before, but that place had the best sauerkraut.
And no one challenged you to a board game.
No one challenged.
Not there.
And that's why you didn't go back.
That was in board games, knife fight. It's the same stakes.
That's right.
Oh, cool. Well, that's been intriguing.
Hell yeah.
I'm pumped about board games now. I'm going to watch this documentary. I hope all the listeners are too.
I already did.
But yeah, you already did. You should feel somewhat honored. Normally, we're talking about the latest Marvel movie or whatever, and Bevan just refuses to watch fucking anything we're talking about, but he's watched this documentary start to finish.
Well, this was something that was interesting to me.
Sure do appreciate
Well, there you go.
the views and the love, and we hope that it just inspires more people to play games and more people to create games and just enjoy the hobby as much as certainly myself and Charles and the other team members do, and certainly sounds as though you all do and your families. So it's it's really one of those things that it's fun to make art about something that is so positive and so enjoyable and everything. We're very, very fortunate to be able to make such a wonderful project and have it be something we could share with everyone.
Brilliant. Well, not only do you have the rare Robert Bevan endorsement there, but Wally, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Normally, because I'm a fairly modest dude, so I don't get to talk about how great my books are. But seeing as you're here, I can say you did a fantastic job with the excellent Brandon Thighmaster book coming soon. Brandon Thighmaster and some other guys, a wonderful narration of a fantastic book. Keep an eye out for it.
you so much for having me out there. I appreciate it.
While you're waiting for that, please do check out Game Master wherever you can find it. And fellas, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye now. See you later. Thanks.